Hi and welcome back to another video. Today's setup looks a bit different. It's just another angle of my room, so don't worry, I'm in the same place. But now you can see my really messy bookshelf behind me that I'm trying my best to cover because I don't want anyone to see most of it. If you've seen some of my older videos, I have a series called Dear Future, which I use a similar setup. But today I'm going to be talking about something, I guess, a bit of a popular topic, and that is again about work, but it's not just about intellectual discussions about work. I wanted to share a bit more of a personal experience with work, and I myself have found myself typing a lot of these queries, like things like what do people learn after they quit their work, what are the things that you should look out for when you quit your job. I wanted to share a bit of my own experience and the things that I've learned after I quit my job. And so this background is, I think on hindsight, I quit my first job pretty impulsively, and I wouldn't say it was a bad decision, but it was a decision that I had to take at that time because I felt like there were no other options. At that time, if I did have what I know now, if I did know a lot more things, if I had a better support system, if I was able to negotiate my way better, I might have been able to stay in that position. But where I was back then, I think that call that I did to quit that job was a risky, but I feel was a much needed risk to take. It was a really scary decision, but I think I'm someone that really can't back out once I've made my mind up, and that is a good and bad thing, especially when it comes to career and work progression. It gives me a huge headache to figure out how to navigate the corporate world, which is why I'm not such a good fit for the place. But let's just get on to the video. So the first thing that I learned after quitting my job, and I think a lot of people will tell you this, is that you're exchanging one toil for the other. Now, when you have a stable job, meaning like you have a full-time salaried career, you don't really have to care too much about your finances and maybe things like health insurance and coverage and all that. And a lot of things are kind of covered for you. So a lot of things are done for you, like your taxes, your any financial issues that you might have, the company pretty much settles that for you. And all you have to do is just kind of turn up, do the work, and oftentimes do a lot of overtime work, but still, it is quite straightforward. And that kind of toil, that kind of mental labor and creative labor that goes into your work, what you get in return is financial stability, supposedly, and also kind of mental ease in your everyday situation, so you don't have to worry too much about all these like livelihood necessities. Now you're exchanging that toil, then you're kind of exchanging the mental and creative labor for then the toil and the anxiety that you have to put up with regards to financial security and all these other things that I mentioned. So ever since I quit my job, finances has not been very great. I would say my starting salary wasn't very high either, but it was substantially more than what I could make as a self-employed individual in a month, and it was very stable, despite it didn't matter how much work I had to do in a month. The amount that was paid was pretty much the same every month. Whereas if I'm out on my own and I'm self-employed, how much I make is really up to how much I am putting in. So it depends on how many days I want to work, how many kind of gigs I'm looking out for, how many people I want to work with, and that is the mental labor that you have to keep up with. What you get in return though is time. So you are exchanging a set of problems and a set of benefits for another set of challenges and another set of benefits. So this is something I learned after my work. I felt like, I thought it would be the extreme opposite. I felt like I would be, in financial ruin. I also thought that I would have such a luxury of time that I would enjoy myself, but I was pretty much in the middle. Like, I didn't find, surprisingly, I was able to make more money than I thought, being self-employed. Of course, not as much as my salary time, but it was a substantial amount. And I was also finding myself struggling with the time that I spent on all these other things like researching how to get paid researching how to handle maybe taxes or insurance and things like that. The time that I thought I took back from the work in order to find myself again, or do things that I like, or to grow develop myself, all these things were also taken up by other concerns that, say, the company or the salaried position will have taken care of. But nowadays I also understand that many companies are moving towards like a contract kind of self-employment situation. So many people who find themselves working for companies might also still find themselves in a much similar self-employed situation. So yeah, I learned that quitting your job is not just like a one and all solution. It's just a transitionary step. There are many challenges that you're taking on by quitting your work that are gonna be maybe even more challenging than when you were doing your work. For me, when I made this decision, I still feel till today that the difficulty that I'm experiencing now as a self-employed individual is still much more tolerable than the kind of difficulty I was facing in a corporate role or in the kind of full-time salaried role. So you just have to pick your battles. If you're someone that does require financial stability, you do require some big spending, then I don't think this is really the right path for you to take. So the second thing I learned was that entrepreneurship is not for everyone. So I don't know how many people have this false narrative that like once you quit your job, you become your own boss. And I think I subscribed a lot to this because I was thinking like the only way to really succeed after quitting a job is to become your own boss, or make your own job, or go and join someone else's company, which is pretty much still the options that you have. So it's either self-employment or you are employed under someone. But I do think that entrepreneurship in itself, being put as such a dichotomous position in relation to like salaried work, it is kind of false overall. I find that being a business owner or being an entrepreneur is really, it shouldn't be as hyped up as it should be. I kind of feel like doing a business is really, really different from just being an employee. Again, like I mentioned, being a self-employed person, you have to care about a lot of other things that you wouldn't have to care about at all if you were just a salaried employee. And being a business owner, you have to then think about so many different things, such as even like people management if you do want to hire people, but you also have to think about things like rent, things like licenses, things like storage, all the digital licensing things that you have to have, all the kind of professional and corporate skills you have to learn just because you're a one-person show. So you have to learn marketing, you have to learn sales, you have to learn all the technical stuff, maybe website hosting. You have to learn all of these things on your own, whereas in a company, typically one person would take each role, and that's it. And I think I did read a couple of like entrepreneurship books earlier in the year, and one of those books actually did mention, a lot of the books actually mentioned that once you become an entrepreneur, you become your own HR management, you become your own welfare management person, and oftentimes freelancers and self-employed individuals can be a lot harder on themselves than companies that they were working for beforehand. So that was a very strange phenomenon. It really shows how much we have internalized this kind of working ethos even up to the time that we quit our jobs. So even after quitting your job, there is still a strong pressure to feel like, okay, now I have to be the boss, I have to be the business owner, the person that then rivals my previously left company or job or whatever title. And I did feel that a lot. I just felt like, oh, now I have to brush up on all my business skills, I have to learn how to build a successful brand, and that was really scary to think about how easily I kind of internalized all that, and it felt like that was the only option when in reality what we should be fighting for, or what we should be striving towards, is just to have a greater diversity of options where we can also opt for a good boss or a good company, and that we can opt to maybe work in smaller companies where the balance and the workload is a lot more manageable. And also, if you want to become an entrepreneur, maybe we can start like co-ops instead, or maybe we can work on many of these different permutations of businesses rather than to pitch individuals to become business owners and entrepreneurs, because I feel like that's too much for like a single person to handle, and to expect that all these people will start to hustle so hard to build a company when the other option is to just be a slave, like a 9 to 5 slave for a corporation that doesn't care for you. I feel like there has to be a greater middle ground than that, and I also feel like we shouldn't make everyone feel like they have to be an entrepreneur to justify them no longer working in the corporate world or pursuing a professional career. I feel like that's also kind of privileged to expect people to do that, because in order to be an entrepreneur, you do have to have quite a lot of starting capital, which you either inherit or you kind of amass by working a high paying job. So that's not a place where everyone can be, obviously. The reality is that a lot of people who are successful usually come from such backgrounds where it is a lot easier to be flexible with your time and money, so that you can actually spend time and effort on building your product or building your brand or your company and actually getting it out to the masses. So that's what I think about entrepreneurship. The third thing that I've learned is something that I don't really mind as much, but some people might find it very difficult, and that is the isolation that you feel after quitting your job. Now, it's true that everyone's life is pretty much centered around jobs. So life in Singapore is very much centered around jobs and work life. And I think this is true in a lot of countries as well. So quitting your job kind of takes you out of that conversation. It takes you out of that context pretty easily, because, it's a classic conversation opener. What do you do for work? What do you do for a living? And at first I didn't really feel this, because myself, I am still a relatively new person on the job market. I only graduated in 2020, so it isn't like everyone around me is already very well established in their careers, and a lot of people are still finding their way. But it's true that nowadays, as your friends kind of progress in their career, they might talk more about their work, and that's a given, because there's hardly any time to do anything else. So if you talk about your hobbies, or you talk about your interests, or even your pet, people might not be able to relate to as much, and people might relate to talking about their bosses, talking about their colleagues, talking about the workplace environment, talking about their workload. It's very easy to kind of go down that conversation. I've been there before. I think in the first few months I was working my first job, that was all I talked about, because that was all I was doing. So I understand that point. And if you're someone that really wants to be part of the crowd and really wants to be part of the conversation, you'll find it's really, really, really frustrating that you just cannot build these sort of connections with people, and it is not as instantaneous as it is, because everyone's working. You can't expect people to very organically be able to talk about all the other things that they do in their downtime, when that's literally 10% of what they do every single day. For me, it's not too much of a problem, like I said, because I'm someone that gets along pretty well by myself. I don't really care whether my conversation flows with other people. The only thing that's mildly irritating is when people kind of assume things about your work or your job, and it's hard for me to explain being self-employed and doing content, because I still find it a bit pretentious. But generally, that whole conversation becomes a bit awkward now after quitting my job. People will always assume that you're still seeking full-time employment. People will always be assuming that you're still too young to understand the real world. People will always be assuming things when it comes to your work. So isolation is a big thing that happens after you quit your job. If you're willing to stomach that, sure, I think it's not going to be a problem for you introverts, but for you extroverts out there, it might give you a lot of frustration and bitterness and resentment. I know some people keep to their jobs simply because of the social aspect, and simply because of the kind of ostracization they might feel if they don't have a job. So that's a completely valid point as well. It's really through jobs and work that we find a lot of validation in our everyday lives, especially as adults. So that's a completely valid point to consider if you are actually thinking of quitting your job. The next thing that I learned after quitting my job was the need for discipline and structure in my life. Again, I want to stress that job and no job, it tends to be such a huge dichotomy between the two, and that when you're in the job, you feel like, I really want the opposite. I just want total freedom, I just want total autonomy, But the fact is, when you're on the other end, you start to also want a bit more structure and a bit more discipline and rigor. And so in the end, we all kind of want a balanced bag of everything. But this is one of the biggest lessons I learned, was that discipline and rigor is necessary for anyone, regardless of whether you're working or not. Rigor and discipline is really important for anyone's self-growth, like for anyone to really feel in tune with their bodies and with their environment. Some sense of structure is really important. Starting your day right, having the kind of clear mindset to start the day, wanting to do meaningful activities throughout the day. You still need some structure and discipline to achieve that. And I think that was an error of mine, to think that after I quit my work, I can just do whatever the hell I want and I would be really, really committed to it. When in fact, you actually have to figure out how to structure your day, and you have to commit to that, which is something that the company, or like wherever you work as a full-time salaried person, that is already sort of forced upon you. That's kind of already put upon you, and you have no choice but to comply. But after quitting your job, you start to realize that actually some form of routine is really, really essential for your sanity. I'm not even talking about like productivity or output. It's just really, really important for a sense of self and a sense of groundedness in your everyday, and to remind yourself that there are meaningful things that you can achieve even if you're not working within a conventional frame of doing things. And that is a huge thing that I've come to learn, which is that people think that after quitting your job that you would just bum around and laze around. But I strongly believe that people are actually very motivated to do things that they want to do, and that they just need a bit more freedom and autonomy to chase the things that they actually want to do. First 2-3 months after I quit my job, I was really, really, really struggling. I wanted to make each day as productive as possible, and I was basically recreating the schedule of a full-time employment for myself again. I was trying to busy myself with copywriting gigs, with any sort of freelance gigs I could find. I was really trying to figure out exactly how I could maximize my earnings, and that was a very terrible place to be in, because I just thought that I could replace one structure with another. But I realized now, about a few months after I quit my job, that what you really need is a structure that works for you. And this actually is super important for anyone that's working in a company. I kind of feel like being able to create schedules for everyone for their own kind of function and their own needs is super important, regardless of whether you are self-employed or whether you are an employee. So in the end, again, I'm saying that so many things that I learned after I quit my job are things that I wish we could all negotiate, no matter what kind of work we're doing. And lastly, interestingly, I learned a newfound appreciation for all the little kinds of work that we do every day. And I'm not talking about work as in work that you exchange for money. I'm talking about little things like washing the dishes, or cleaning the house, or taking a trip out to the park. Maybe housework is most of it, but even things like going out, doing some creative work, photographing, like photographing nature, or sort of researching your own things. All these things are work. These are things that people can do for paid labor. But now that I have the free time, I could do it of my own accord. And I understand that these all constitute work too. And I really, really enjoy it. I enjoy working, meaning like working my hands, working my eyes, my brain. I'm just not doing it for like a monetary compensation. And that really begs the question, I guess, what really is work? What really are activities that produce value? And this is something that I feel I'm much more at ease with. The fact that I can see myself as working. I am doing things, I am making things actively, but I'm not just doing it in exchange, in transaction for a monthly salary thing. I am doing all these little pieces of work to maintain my life, and that in itself should be a good reason to keep doing it. But of course, all these things contribute to a bigger cause. And I feel like if all of us see work in that way, say maybe even preparing a meal, right, it is work, being able to do that for other people, then I wonder what kinds of discussions that can bring up to the idea of salaried work or employed work. And I feel like we've structured that so deeply, that even just like bringing your food to your neighbors has been taken over by delivery apps and delivery jobs and things like that. And then I think it's a really good open conversation to have about things that we consider work, in not just errands, right? I mean, we tend to think of them as errands, but we do consider them as serious work. Then that might raise questions about how we treat people who do these things for a living, how we ourselves might regard these activities. The soft work, I really started to appreciate all these little things that I was able to do with my free time once I quit my job. And I guess this is a positive point, because I feel like a lot of us, especially if we're just going about our day to day, we might have lost this kind of appreciation for the small things. I know I'm not the best at housekeeping. I'm still pretty bad at house chores, but I am starting to enjoy it a lot more. I like to cook at home, and also like just being a general retired person at home, even though I'm just starting out on my professional life, I guess. But it's really nice to just have this time to myself to do all these things, and it feels good to be at home. It really does. So quitting my job has really taught me that sort of humbleness and that sort of groundedness in these everyday things. And I feel like that has given me so much to think about in terms of appreciating the people that have done all these little works for me throughout my whole life. Like the people that clean the streets almost every day, and they have to do it for work. My mom, who had to take care of the house while we were growing up as kids. All these things are actual work, and a lot of times people are doing it while being paid very little, and that's still very unfortunate, I think, for me, to think about the way that this kind of work is being treated. So that's the last lesson that I have when it comes to things I've learned after quitting my job. I hope this video was useful. I kind of wanted to give a bit more of a balanced view to things. And a lot of people have been creating a lot of content about quitting their jobs lately because of the whole anti-work thing, and I myself have been talking a lot about anti-work and talking about work and employment and jobs and everything in total, but really I am still figuring a lot of things out. I am still someone who's just questioning a lot of things because I want to have better discussions around topics, and I'm not entirely against jobs and employment, but I really do think that there is a huge pressing need to talk about the way that we treat our jobs and the way that we treat the people who do jobs that might be different from ours, and what it really means to have a career and professional development, and to bridge the gaps between all these different conversations. I don't want corporate people to just stay within their corporate circles. I also want them to come out and talk to people, everyday people who's actually doing a lot of laborious stuff for them. I also want a lot of the people who are stuck in stagnant wage jobs to be able to find jobs that can help them lead comfortable lives, because that's what we all deserve for being on this planet, but definitely comfortable in a ethical and sustainable way, of course. So in the end, in conclusion, I guess, a lot of the things I learned after I quit my jobs, I think that I realized I want more and more people to have, even in their salaried jobs. I kind of feel like we all deserve employment, or at least the option of employment where we don't have to feel like we are subservient to such a huge degree. I also don't believe that the only option is then to hustle as an entrepreneur to your death. Like I don't feel like it's right that it's either work a dead-end job or to monetize all your hobbies and suck the joy out of all of them. I don't think these two options should be what we think are the only two options in this world. I really do hope that there are more ways to be able to live on this planet while being able to build communities and to build happy, comfortable lives that is aligned with the environment and nature and all these cute little things around us. I really do hope that all ties in together. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, do let me know down in the comments. Let me know like what you think about the whole quitting job thing happening right now, and if you've quit your job recently or if you're thinking about it, what are your concerns in considering all that? So thank you so much again for joining me on this video, and I hope to be back soon again. And it's been really lovely to be back on the camera talking to you all again and sharing some of my own thoughts. Yeah, so cool. Thank you so much. Hope you're having a good day. If not, I do hope that you're having a good night's rest tonight, a good evening to spend relaxing, I hope. If not, I do hope that tomorrow will be a much better day for you, and I'll see you soon on my channel again. So thank you so much, and bye.